So the first song is going to be Sanctuary. I think I even memorized these words. It's, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. This is your time to share your remembrances and reflections, your gratitude, your grief with each other. So the mics are open. First person can come to the pulpit, the second to the lectern, and feel free to come forward as you are ready.
Like all of you here, when we learned of Kent's death, it was a great shock. But we have great remembrances of Kent and what he meant to our youth here. And as Mark so elegantly stated throughout the sermon, how Kent reached so many of our youth. And I'm going to say, in large part to the youth that may be troubled, we're not fitting in particular. Kent entrusted me, whether wisely or foolishly, many years ago in being the teacher for the SWAT class. And I see that Lauren is here, and she'll remember those days. the only teaching that I perhaps had ever done was maybe within my own work life and to our two daughters, Michelle and Cheryl, and I would leave it to them to comment on whether that was a worthwhile experience or not. I had expectations of that SWAT class. I'm sure the individuals in that SWAT class had different expectations. There were some challenging moments in that SWAT class. And I look at the individuals that created some of those challenges at this point in time, and I see how Kent worked with those individuals and how they are such fine, outstanding young men and women today. Where it was at times, and I will say, there were two of them in particular that I had to dismiss from the class. And now they are all fine and outstanding members of our community. So Kent had a way of working with people. As many of you know, our oldest daughter, Michelle, is a Presbyterian minister. And as she was a senior in high school, she was contemplating, as most seniors do, as to where to go to college. She had been looking at a number of Christian schools, and then also what I'll refer to as secular schools. And I will always thank, and I think Michelle does too, very much so, Kent's words to her say, go out and experience life. So don't necessarily focus yourself on that Christian school, but go out and experience life as it is elsewhere. And that's not to say that you can't experience life in a Christian school or whatever, but he recognized to get out and whatever, so that, once again I'll use the term, as you experience life, that'll make you richer, grower, and you'll be able to bring that later on, if you should decide to, in whatever capacity, bring your Christian faith forward to others. And I always hesitate to speak on behalf of any of my daughters. but I will indicate that I think that is something that Michelle holds dear to her heart in her remembrances of Kent, those words of advice. Things weren't always that smoothly for Michelle at times, but it strengthened her when she did make that commitment to go into the ministry. And I also think about Cheryl, having grown up in this church and obviously being influenced by Kent. We have difficulty today having young people attend church. If you're in your 20s and 30s, etc. And I think of the words that Mark said about Kent wanting to make sure the family stayed together in a church service. As we now have grandchildren, they attend the church services. Cheryl and her husband Chris, with their 2.5-year-old Colton, are members of Fifth Avenue, and they go there on a regular basis. Of course, Michelle and the two grandchildren in Abu Dhabi, as Michelle has been working at an Anglican church. So I wholeheartedly endorse Kent's concept and look forward to having children within our worship service for the entire time. Kent had an influence on many, many different people here. I will also have to say at some point in time, he and I had differences of opinion on certain operations of the church. And so some of his scars that Mark was referring to, I could have inflicted on him at some point in time. But the bottom of it, he had a heart of gold, and he was always there for our youth. Thank you.
I wish I had prepared for this. I didn't, but as I was sitting in the pews today, I remember several things about Kent. Herbie and I were very fortunate to be in his 7 a.m. Revelation class, which was a difficult book for us to study, and he just opened it up to us. Secondly, I was a cook at Hennelopen with several other really fun ladies. We had a wonderful time. The thing I remember most about Hennelopen was the communion service on the beach on the last night. It was so meaningful to all of us, including we adults. The third thing I remember is that he had a junior high afternoon, and I've just been racking my brain. I can't remember what it was called. But the students would come from GW and BF and from other, what was it called? I was a homework helper, but what was the name of the group? High Point. I've been trying to think of it since last Wednesday. Yes, and I was one of the homework helpers. I didn't have a whole lot of people that wanted help, but I was grateful for the ones that did ask. I was a math teacher, and we had a French teacher, and I'm trying to think, were you a homework helper too? Yeah. And then we would do some of Kent's stupid games, they called them, and he was known for that, and the kids loved it. And then there was always a dinner attached to it before the kids would go off to choir practice. A number of them went from there to choir practice. And let me think if there is a fourth thing. I knew I'd forget one of the things. But anyhow, I have wonderful memories of him and what he did in this church. My daughter is an Orthodox Christian now, and the children from the time they are babies stand in the church service, which is often 2 hours long. It amazes me to watch this happen. And then they have Sunday school afterwards. So thank you, Kent. I loved my time with you.
I know I could go on and talk about Kent and his influence on my own 3 children's lives. He was their minister. He was a formative influence on them. But I want to talk about how I was influenced by Kent. Marilyn Ewell and I co-chaired with Kent the committee to take that middle hour between our 2 traditional services and turn it into an education hour for adults and children. And the hope was that parents would come to worship with their children and then stay for the Sunday school, and both would go to class. I have to sort of smile as we're coming back around to doing that. When we went to one service, it kind of, that concept fell apart. But it was probably one of the most challenging things I ever worked on here at Westside. It was not everybody's favorite idea. I never had received hate mail until I served on that committee, believe it or not. But I was so impressed working with Kent. He had a vision, but he didn't push it on anybody or on us as the leaders of this committee, and I came so to embrace the concept of children in worship, and that he would say, well, how is it, one of the big complaints was, well, they won't behave, they'll be climbing over the pews, they'll be noisy. And Kent said, well, how is a child ever going to learn how to behave in worship if they aren't brought to worship and taught how to behave in worship? And I have forever signed on to that ideal, and I'm so glad to know we're coming back around to that. He was also our tech guru. I served on the stewardship committee for a number of years, and we had to rely on that computer system that none of us could figure out but Kent. And in fact, the day of the fire, Kent grabbed the computer on the way out the door because he knew that had all the information in it. And then the final thing that he I don't know where this came from, but it was his last Henlopen, and he asked me to be a counselor for the 8th grade girls, and this was way out of my comfort zone. I'm not a camper, I'm not any of those things, but he asked me to please prayerfully consider it, so I did it. It was beastly hot down there, at least when we first went on the first few days. I'm in this barracks-like oven, frankly. It was hotter inside than out. I called home the first time and I told Bill, I think I'm going to die. It was just... And I told Kent, Kent could see it on my face. I didn't even have my red face at this point. I didn't even have to say anything, but he just smiled, that simple smile of his, and, kind of shook his head. And I just knew he was saying, you'll get through this, you'll be able to do it. He did just sort of quietly and gently fade away toward the end of that week. He didn't want it to be about him and this being his last Henlopen and have there be any kind of a fuss. And he did, and it was beautiful. Liz came down and she did that beachside communion, which was so moving. And so I was overwhelmed when I heard the news. I will miss him, even though he's not been a part of our life here for a number of years. He's always in the back of my mind, that humble spirit and that gentle smile. And I'll miss him.
So 2 quick things that I'm thinking about. And I almost said it when I did the reading this morning. Kent loved to say about the Bible, the world's best-selling book that no one ever read. And then he did this thing, and I'm going to stand in the middle and mime it. This was his theology. He had this little fuzzy kind of beanbag ball, and he'd ask, and you guys know this stuff. He'd say, who's the worst person in the last 100 years you could think of? Hitler. He said, yeah, of course, Hitler. Take this ball, he says, and on the road to God, Hitler would drop the ball and fall behind him. It's about there. Pick the ball. Now, who's the most wonderful person in the last 100 years that's affected the world?
Mother Teresa.
Yeah, that's always the answer, Mother Teresa. You toss it and the ball fall out. Step in front of him, right? Pick the ball. And he'd say, hit the back there and say, and there's Jesus. So here we are, here's Kent, here's Mother Teresa, here's Hitler. We want to all come together. Jesus is way over there.
All right, don't mind the reading glasses. It's hit me hard lately. This was because I work on Saturdays, I had to miss yesterday's celebration at the barn. And so I wrote this to Kent. There's just one of many, but I'll read through it really quickly. Dear Kent, the shock and sadness of your passing leaves so many thoughts, so many happy memories, and sadly some regrets that we didn't stay in touch more often after your retirement. Oh, sorry. I'm always reading fast. I'm sorry I can't be there to celebrate your life with all the other barn alumni and youths, so I will share some of my memories of you in this letter. I know you already know them in heaven, but here are a few. There are many more I will always treasure. This was kind of picked on in the newsletter. When Gene and I joined Westside some 14 years ago, we were unsure, nervous, and didn't know where to fit in. It was only a short time after joining when Gene and I got a phone call from you at home. You were asking us to become parent members of the barn program to work with middle school youth. Oh boy. So Gene and I looked at each other. We each had a different phone extension. And I was in the kitchen and she was in another room, and we were looking at each other through the rooms going, oh boy, what do we do? And so we were trying to do the how do we gracefully get out of this look to each other, and we knew he knew it. But he was so calm and sure of himself. He sounded so happy and enthusiastic that this would be a place for us, that we couldn't help but catch his enthusiasm. And that was the beginning of our home within a home at Westside for 12 years. After a few years of working with the youth, Gene and I went on our first Henlopen trip. And everything that you said about Henlopen, especially the first time you're there, is, oh my God, it's hot, muggy. I don't do humidity and heat. I was cranky, I'll admit it. Towards the end, I would get very cranky. But after a few years of working with the youth, we went on that first trip. And to us, it was a culmination of the time we had spent at Barn every week and a chance to spend more time with the youth that we had to work with for that winter and spring season. For Kent, it was both a wonderful occasion and a highly stressful time of making sure the week was a success, keeping us safe, and as mentioned in the Facebook post, sitting up every night by the fence, keeping careful watch on us all. Even though he was so busy, or you were so busy, you had all that exhausting planning work and responsibility. You always grabbed time to check on us to make sure we were okay. On your last Henlopen trip, this is the story. Andy Roughgarden, Gene, and I decided to relive our earlier youth in hindsight. Andy knows this, he approved this too, because we did it. And we somewhat childishly decided to tie some empty cans on the bottom of the car and put good luck and happy retirement on your windows on the final night. So it was like 2 o'clock in the morning when we did this. We got back into the camp at 3. We had checked with everybody who was staying with the kids to make sure that they were in there. Of course, you always had to do that. But we got up and we waited, got up early after a couple hours of sleep to laugh as he drove by. But before, when he drove by, he still had the stuff on the window, but the cans were gone. And we had worked really hard. We buried them in the sand. We made sure that they were fully underneath the car, but he was way too smart for that. And so he was very serious and he was upset, because he wanted to leave quietly. And before leaving, he told us that we'd have to work harder than that to fool him. It was our way of saying thanks. We just wanted to kind of tweak him a little bit. We didn't realize that he wanted to leave that quietly, but the impact that he had on all of us will never be quiet. You taught us to love, respect, and honor the youth we work with and watch grow up. You taught us how to talk with them, understand them at their different stages in life, have fun with them, then let them go as they went on to their next chapter. You shared our joy when we saw the aha moment in the children's church life. That was always amazing. You inspired us both, Gene to change course to become a teacher, and me to have the courage to advocate for our foundation service. At those impromptu gatherings after Barn, you took time to teach a willful church member like me to make sense of religion, the church, the Bible, and science. You taught me that the things my late father had tried to explain to me about the church were correct. You taught me that sometimes things happen because they happen, but God is still there for us. Through all the heartache that Margot, Palmer, Tyler, and all the people you touched are going through, I can only cling to that thought. God definitely brought home a keeper. Thanks.
Hi. I grew up with Ken in the church. He left in 2010, and I graduated high school in 2012, so most of my upbringing was from Ken. I seem to have blacked out most of middle school, so I don't really remember, some of Henlopen, but I do remember a few things that he said to me that have stuck with me that I still think about today. One of which was in Focus. We always like to challenge him and say, prove to us that God is real, to give us a formula, give us a science, tell us how he's real. And I remember it was like that retreat, and we were in this weird, murky basement. I don't remember where we went. It wasn't here. It was somewhere far away. I don't know, it's a blur. And he said, you don't have to prove to somebody that God is real. If somebody that's not a believer asks you if God is real, then you should ask them to prove to you how he's not. And I've been in situations like this before where people have said prove God's real, and I'll always say, well, prove to me that he's not. and they're unable to come up with an answer. So that's something that stuck with me from a young age, I think 8th grade. And then another story that I have is, I think around in that same murky basement, we were asking about how, like, if God created Earth, and who created God, and where did God come from? And it was just like these questions that can make your head spin. And he said, your head's spinning for a reason. If you knew where God came from and how the earth was created, and then where God was created, then there'd be no such thing as faith, and you would know all of the answers, and then where would your faith be? So that's something that has stuck with me in 2 stories that I remember, even though I blacked out most of my childhood. Traumatic time.
So I just want to comment. I traveled with Kent on mission trips, and I taught confirmation one year, and so what I want to comment on is how well he understood the youth, way more than any parent can understand the youth. And one of the things that he confided in them is that as a youth, he was an atheist, and I don't know who he talked to, but he had a mentor, and he was going to prove all the ways that there was no God, and he said what he did was read the Bible cover to cover. And that is where his spirituality or his relationship with God developed, because he really wanted to prove that there was no God, and that all of this was just, somebody's, way to form us into well-behaved beings, I guess. And he was really fun. I mean, like, he could sleep anywhere. Like, he did not sleep much. So on these mission trips, he would always sleep between the girls and the boys areas to make sure there was nothing going on. He let them stay up really late because bonding was so important to him. Like when we were driving down to Asheville, I guess it was, there were several times we went to Asheville, we would have multiple 15-passenger vans, and he made the kids go into different vans. Like, you couldn't sit with the same people. So he didn't want any cliques or anything. He wanted everyone to get to know everybody else. And then we'd sing songs, like we sang this, sanctuary song a lot. And the kids actually developed, hand motions, and it was really powerful. I would say that it helped me with my spirituality by seeing the simple parts and seeing God everywhere. So thank you again.
I have to follow Ann because I first got to know Ann on the Mexico mission trip years back, and that's where I also got to know Kent. So we moved here when our children were around middle school age, and it's awkward to fit in and to get to know people, but Kent really embraced them, and they really just immediately felt comfortable with the youth group and in the church, and I just really grew to admire Kent an awful lot. One thing that I learned early on, because I was always curious, how are the kids doing? Are they fitting in? Are they making new friends? And, Kent made it very clear that he wasn't going to gossip about the kids to the parents. He was, that they had their private lives, and that was okay, and the parents didn't have to know everything. And I really respected that. I thought that was wonderful. The other way that I remember Ken quickly connected with the youth was through his early adoption of technology. They really respected that he knew so much about technology, and he could really talk to them on their level and their terms. And as somebody mentioned, his love of hard rock music. And they seem to connect on that level as well. So that leads me into my story about when I agreed to go to be a chaperone for the one and only Mexico mission trip that I went on with Kent and the youth. And that was when I think my daughter was an early teenager, Christina, and she was reluctant to go. And I felt as though, she had grown up in sort of this suburban bubble, and that she really needed to have exposure to the larger world and the people who weren't as privileged as people in Bergen County. So she came, so I talked to Ken, and he said, well, why don't you come as a chaperone? So I came willingly as a chaperone, and Christina came kicking and screaming as one of the youth. And it turned out to be one of the best experiences of her life. It just turned things around. She ended up going back to Mexico after she graduated from college to be a teacher. It just was a very wonderful experience for her. And as Kent told us ahead of time, it would be a life-changing experience, and it was for me and for her and for the other kids there. But I have to tell some funny stories about Kent, in that I was new to the group, and I think people like Anne had been there before, so people were more familiar with Ken. I was just getting to know him. And for some reason, he decided, we were driving around in this big van with these youth in the back, maybe 6 youth or 8 youth in the back of the van, and Kent decided that I was going to be his navigator. I was going to sit in the front seat with him and help him navigate. Well, nobody in that whole group clued me in about his ADD and his difficulty with directions, which I guess he was famous for, but I didn't know. So he said, okay, will you be my navigator? I was a little surprised, why me? I'm not so great with directions myself. But there we were, right, Joe? Right. But there we were driving around these dirt roads in Mexico, no street signs. The roads are, they're not even paved. They kind of wander in and out and all around. And he's like looking at me like, well, where are we going? And no maps, no directions. It was quite humorous. But we worked it out, and the kids in the back they got a lot of sightseeing in. What else happened? Oh, and he also clued me in early on that trip when I was the navigator that he and Margot had this arrangement that the one who drives gets to choose the music. So I was thinking, well, does that mean he gets to choose the music and I don't, and that was the case, that I had to fill in for his pattern with Margot. And it was all hard rock. And by the end of the traveling back and forth and getting lost and everything with all this hard rock, I had a headache at the end of the day. But we stuck it out, and we got where we needed to go, and we built a couple houses, and it was just a really wonderful experience. I do remember when we were crossing the border back into the States, because we would stay in Mission, Texas, near McAllen, and then sleep there at a religious retreat. It was a beautiful, beautiful retreat with orange trees and lemon trees all around. You'd wake up in the morning and you'd have this beautiful scent of orange and lemons and the groves and the trees outside. And then we would get in the vans and cross the border into Mexico, where we would meet at the other mission and then go and do activities with the kids or build the homes. And coming back the first day, Ken was very, very strict, and he wasn't usually didn't lay down the law like that. But he said, now when we go through customs, nobody say anything. I don't want to hear any word from the back of the van. And, I was really puzzled why. We had all been singing or whatever we were doing. And we got through customs, and he was very insistent, nobody say anything. He answered when the customs person came up and asked him, who do you have in your van? Where are you going? What are you doing? He was very monosyllable, which wasn't unusual for Ken, right? But he knew, I guess he knew from past experience. So we happened to have one Asian American woman, youth in the van, and the customs inspector decided to focus in on her and to scrutinize her being there and what was she doing, could he see her passport, and Ken was very protective, and he just gave the information that he needed to give, no more, no less, and we almost thought we would not be able to get through, but we did, and we got back to the mission, and then we all understood why Ken was very strict about saying or not saying anything to the inspector. The other thing that I want to say in praise of Kent is that when we moved here, there were 3 young women around the age of our daughter Christina who had missed their confirmation year. So we moved from one town and they did it 1 year, and then in this town it was a different year. So there were 3 young women who we were very upset. Okay, we thought, she was going to be able to be confirmed, and so Kent offered to do a semi-private confirmation class with these 3 young women. And one of them was Kayla Malazzo, I believe, and the other one was Brianna, I believe, and I could honestly say, and then our Christina, and I could honestly say that those 3 young women today have a very, very deep faith. And I can't help but think that it was inspired by that time that Kent took with them, when they really would have missed out otherwise. So thank you for listening. He was really wonderful.
When we're here because the sun's on that side, and I know how bad the cameras get when the sun's in the way, but anyway. Kent was always one of those folks who was in the running for world's oldest teenager, kind of like Dick Clark. He had this gift for identifying with adolescents, the changes their bodies and minds were going through, and just, all these experiences that for someone growing up might be terrifying. Many parents out there really struggle with this point in life. And Kent made it look natural. You have problems raising one child, Kent would take a dozen on a weekly basis at Barn, or upwards of 60 to 70 in the case of Henlopen. And each individual person there was welcomed, an individual connection was established, and with each of those people, Kent knew exactly how much freedom, how much responsibility, how much hand-holding, how much reassurance, how much whatever that each child in his care needed. And everyone, and I don't care how outcast you were, Kent would find a way to make you accept it, because I know I didn't make it easy on him. But lo and behold, he found a way. And I mean, it's thanks to him. Frankly, if it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I mean, I'd be alive. Don't get me, I didn't mean that. But I probably wouldn't be here at this church right now. He was just, he had that kind of presence that, especially for teenagers and these people going through what to them is a very rough time in their lives. He would take these kids and mold them into strong adults, strong in the faith, strong in character, strong in anything, and ready to handle the challenges of life. I don't know of a single person that was raised in Kent's youth programs that became a bad person. And over the years, there were hundreds of these kids. And all of them grew up and became his legacy to this world. And basically became, I know Mark likes to talk about people being little Christs. I'd like to think that, as much as Kent would hate to hear it, that we all became little Kents. I know that I've followed in his footsteps, taking in youth to run the audio and video systems. I know that, many other people have, done much the same in their own endeavors. But the main thing is that for Kent, it was about his legacy, about what he could give to those kids. And I, for one, would like to say that in those endeavors, he passed with flying colors. Thank you.
I want only to say a little short story about Kent. I was, during the time when mothers had to supervise or to help in the High Point at the barn. And I was there kind of insecure what I should actually do. So Kent said, sit down in the lower basement where couches were, old ones, I think it's refurnished by now. And then it was a time he said, everybody goes upstairs and does homework. Oh, I said, I'm sitting here, I have nothing to do. They are doing homework. But instead of homework, it got louder and louder. It was like a trampling of all the floor was shaking. It was unbelievable. So I said to Kent, who was also downstairs, I'm going upstairs, I have to see what is going on. He said, no, you stay here. And I said, don't you hear it? And he said, yeah, that's normal. Let me go up. And he went upstairs. And it was like a bomb. Everybody was screaming, and it was unbelievable. And I said, he cannot manage it. And then it's calmed down, and then it was totally quiet. And he came down and said, everything is fine. And I said, what did you do? How did you calm these wild kids down? And he said, well, you are right, they were wild, but they needed to get rid of their energy. And so I made them scream first really loud and jump and do everything what they wanted to do. And then they were supposed to do their homework, and they all sat down and did their homework. And I said, no. I heard actually my son, I thought, as every mother thinks, she hears her son especially out of the screaming. I said, is he really quiet? And he said, I go up and send him down. And it said, that he doesn't want to do. He went upstairs and came down with my totally calm son. And my son said to me, Mom, don't really worry. Everything is fine. And Kent said to me, I should reassure you. And I said, thank you. And he went upstairs, and I had probably an hour total quiet. How he did this, he was not even present. And then I asked my son, did you do your homework? No. Did the others do homework? No. What did you do up there? Oh, we played some games on the paper, shipping, how it is called, sink ships or something. And it was wonderful. And then they came down and were happy. That was my little story.
I'm usually very composed when I speak, but my heart's heavy too, like I'm sure a lot of yours are. You know, my kids grew up in this church. I brought them diligently on Sundays. They went to Sunday school. They came during the holidays. And sometimes they rolled their eyes, and sometimes they said they were sick and they couldn't go. But when Kent called them, they ran. They didn't walk, they ran. I always called Kent the Pied Piper of Christianity for the youth, because those kids followed him joyfully wherever he went. They came home with quirky stories from Hennelopen, from Barn, like you've heard this morning, and I never got Kent. I never kind of understood how he did things, but I watched my kids follow him like someone would follow the Pied Piper. They never looked back. They'd get on that bus at Hennelopen, they kind of wave and say, goodbye, see you later, you know? And I think that's so important when we can do that, when we have people in our lives to fill in where we can't, or to take our kids and show them a different way and connect with them in ways that we can't. And I think what Mark said today about connecting, growing, and serving, Kent was before his time. That's what he did. He modeled what this church now is saying out loud. And for that, I am so thankful, not only as a parent of children who experienced Kent, but as a parent or as a person in this congregation, that this is where the church has come to be. I know I've struggled. Olivia, my daughter, actually is down in North Carolina, and she drove down to Asheville yesterday for the service. And I've struggled because my kids have struggled through this. But like anything, I try to look at it and say, what can I learn from this? And one thing was written in the bulletin, that we have to say to people what they mean in our lives. I know people knew what Kent did for my children, but I didn't always say that. And sometimes we don't want to have those regrets. So I will make a conscious effort to tell those people out there something they may have done during the week for me, something they may have done in the past, but that's one thing that I'm bringing to light. The other thing is, I feel a very big void. And whenever you find a void in your life, I think what's important is to try to fill that void. So I will look carefully at Kent, what he did for my kids and how he did it. And I will try to fill that void as being a mentor in my own way, in helping others, as he did, to be a Pied Piper. And I think there's something very profound about the fact that he started as an atheist. He started in darkness, and yet he became the light that others followed. So I think if we can take all those things away from a very sorrowful, void-filled time and fill those voids with looking at life in a different way, we will have honored Kent in the way I think he'd want to be honored.
Anybody else want to offer any words or reflections? I want to thank everyone who did speak, and the words that you offer, I think, were shared by so many others. And even if you didn't get to speak, our listening ears and hearts will remain open, and I hope that you find ways to share the stories, because they're so important, particularly when we grieve, and particularly when we're trying to fill a void, and it is a void. For our final hymn, it is Great is Thy Faithfulness. What number is that? 276. I knew that. I was just afraid to say it out loud. I did. I can't believe it. So 276, if you would rise and join your voices with this great ancient hymn. On this Father's Day, I'm mindful of Tyler and Palmer, who lost their dad. And I'm remembering Parker Palmer, the great teacher and writer, who, when he lost his father and was grieving that he would never be able to call him up and ask him for advice, in his moment of grief, he remembered that what his father really taught him was how to lean on the grace of God. And that hadn't changed. And so the one who we just sung to is here with us, always, loving us into being. So hold somebody's hand as we close in prayer. I'm going to hold the drummer's hand. and let us pray. Lord, we thank you for Kent. We thank you for all that he poured into this community of faith, for all that he saw in us, even when we didn't see the same thing. We thank you for how he partnered with moms and dads and joined them in loving their children and raising them up into adulthood, into maturity, into the great vision of Jesus. And so, Lord, we pray that we would honor Kent by following in his footsteps, by being little Kents, little Christs, that all who come here might sense that radically inclusive love and might feel your call upon their heart to join in mission and ministry, to bring the love of God into the darkest corners of this world, to be the light of the world. Amen.